Hey everybody, it's Jonathan and I am back with another video, and today I'm going to be doing my reading wrap up for the month of July. Now, July was such a great reading month for me. I got 8 books read, which pretty much was like all I read for like 3 months straight. But in 1 month, I got 8 books, which I feel really good about. Goodreads has definitely stopped reminding me that I'm behind on my books read, my Goodreads goal for the year. So now I'm getting all caught up. I'm super excited, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to stop using Goodreads though, and I'm going to move over to Storygraph. So be on the lookout on my social media for when I change over there. And if you actually are using Storygraph, let me know in the comment section, because I definitely want to kind of just slowly move over to that platform, because you know Amazon is trash right now. I am going to be looking at my Goodreads and seeing what I read in the order that I read it. I read 8 books during the month of July. I'm excited to talk about these. There were some good ones, there were some and there were some like ones. So if you're interested in seeing what I read in the month of July, keep on watching, and let's get right into this video. The first book that I read during the month of July and finished was actually Ace of Spades by Faridah, Abìke, Iyimide, and I probably just butchered her name. Faridah is a British author, and this book has definitely made its rounds so far. This book has definitely made its rounds so far on BookTube, and it seems that everybody enjoyed it. However, I did not. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, and I did a live discussion talking about what I really did not like about this book. I can see Ace of Spades becoming a BookTube favorite. It's YA. People are in love with the cover. However, I was not in love with the story at all. But if you want to see my thoughts, definitely go watch my live discussion. And the live chat is still up, so you can kind of see what other people's thoughts were and how everybody was feeling about it and how I felt about this book and why I disliked it. And it was really nice to see that everybody was very respectful, you know, of my perspective, and listened, and, you know, really had like a conversation with me about this book. So definitely go check out that live discussion if you want to hear about my thoughts on Ace of Spades. While I was reading Ace of Spades, I was reading Ghosts in the Schoolyard by Ewing. Ewing actually just released a middle grade book called Maya and the Robot, and I really, I would definitely encourage everybody who's a little bit more interested, not in nonfiction, but in like middle grade YA, to definitely go check out Ewing's children's book, Maya and the Robot. And also, she writes poetry, and I've been wanting to get into her poetry, so I definitely plan on picking up some of her poetry next. But Ghost in the Schoolyard is a little bit different. Ewing is a former educator, high school educator, but is now the assistant professor at the University of Chicago School of Social Service Administration. She's authored 1919 and Electric Arches, which are both books of poetry, and has had essays appear in like the New York Times, Washington Post, all these different things, New Yorker. And I was recommended this book. As an educator myself, I was interested in reading a lot more just about racism within the educational system. And so like the subtitle of this book is Racism in School Closings on Chicago's South Side. And so this book really talks about, you know, how people define a school being failing, you know, gentrification, redlining, you know, all of these different things that play roles in the quality of schools and the quality of a child's education and the resources they receive, and all of the mess that was going on in Chicago public schools around like the 2000s, 2010s, and just the history. It was super interesting because a lot of this stuff was going on when I was in elementary school, through when I was in high school going into college. And I remember hearing about some of these politicians and, school superintendents and all these things like Barbara Byrd Bennett. Barbara Byrd Bennett also came to Cleveland Public Schools when I was younger. And I remember people always talking about Barbara Byrd Bennett. And it was just interesting to hear that name, Rahm Emanuel, and all of these different people, and the way that they just did not care about Black students. The way that their policies were just put in place with little regard for the quality of education for Black students, and just the history of that. And, seeing the way that these different things, these different policies and these school closings and all these different things affected Chicago public schools, it reminded me of a good portion of my own education. When a lot of students were being bused in Cleveland, and, the idea of school choice and school closings. I remember they were closing schools, and they literally split up me and so many of my friends just to send them to different schools, and the way that it disrupted our education and, disrupted our school community. And sort of whether or not a school is the best, the importance of school community and school culture, and students that have been growing up together continuing to attend the same school, and the way that affects their mental health. And she talks about this idea of grief. It brings in a little bit of ideas that come from Afro pessimism, and this was a super interesting book, talking about racism and school closings in the Chicago South Side. And so I definitely would encourage all educators, all people interested in education, parents, to pick up this book, just so you can kind of see the parallels between what happened in Chicago with, your own cities if you don't live in Chicago. So I definitely would encourage everybody to pick up Ghosts in the Schoolyard by Eve L. Ewing. After I read Ghosts in the Schoolyard, I picked up Brandon Taylor's second book, Filthy Animals. And if you have been subscribed to me for a hot minute, or you have watched that video, I read Real Life by Brandon Taylor, and I enjoyed it for the first 200 pages, but then it kind of went off the rails for me personally. And so I was not a biggest fan of where that book went. However, I got an arc of Filthy Animals. This book came out on June 22nd. Filthy Animals is a collection of short stories by Brandon Taylor. For me personally, I think that short stories are where Brandon Taylor really shines. Filthy Animals follows this group of creatives that live in the Midwest, and they're all sort of searching for their place, searching for their purpose, searching for love and connection. And a lot of them are just searching for just physical touch a lot of times in these stories. And so what I really love about Brandon Taylor's writing, which it was kind of rough in real life reading it, especially for a full-length novel about one character, he writes humans really well. And, he writes about just the desperation, the longing, the lust, the loneliness that humans experience so well, it's kind of scary. It can sometimes be a little bit overwhelming, specifically in real life, because the characters, they don't make the best decisions. The characters are not doing the right thing all the time. They're doing some morally questionable things a lot of the time. And so I really liked how it broke things up in Filthy Animals, getting these different perspectives from these different people. And some of them are connected, physically. Some of them are connected just in terms of just like the emotions and the things that they're facing in life. And so I just really think that this was exactly what I needed from Brandon Taylor. And I would definitely encourage people to pick this up. I kind of want to reread this during the winter. I think I mentioned this to somebody, like, like that winter read feeling. This feels like a really good winter read. The setting is kind of, like when it's snowing, and it definitely can randomly snow in the Midwest, but you definitely got like that cold feeling. Snow is falling, all those different things. So I think this would be a really great winter read, but I really enjoyed Filthy Animals. After I read Filthy Animals, I finally got a chance to read The Taking of Jake Livingston by Ryan Douglas. I had this book on my Black and Queer book list for 2021, which I'm so happy because I actually read 2 of the books that are on that list this month. I've pretty much either purchased or read every book that has come out so far on that list, which, was the purpose of it. I really wanted to hold myself accountable for picking up these books and making sure that I had a place where I could just look and know that these books are coming out to make sure that I pick them up and support these authors. But the Taking of Jake Livingston is, I probably should read the blurb. So living in 2 worlds is exhausting, and no one knows this better than 16-year-old Jake Livingston. His working class, diverse neighborhood is a far cry from the world of St. Clair Prep, where he is one of the only Black students constantly at the mercy of racist teachers and peers who do not understand him. But when his neighbor, a survivor of a grisly school shooting, is murdered and the bloody initials of the now dead shooter, Sawyer Dune, are left on the entryway wall of Jake's home, Jake is forced to confront another world. He wishes he could escape, the world of the dead. As a medium, Jake sees ghosts around him all the time. Most are harmless, stuck in their death loops as they relive their deaths over and over again. They rarely interact with people. And while for most of his life, Jake has avoided them, this time there is no running away. Sawyer was a troubled teen who shot and killed 6 kids at a local high school before taking his own life. Now he's a powerful, vengeful ghost, and he has plans for the afterlife. Plans that include Jake. When Sawyer begins stalking him, high school becomes a different kind of survival game, one Jake is not sure he can win. So, first of all, I will address the fact that I have talked about the private school, only Black kid, one of the only Black kids at school narrative in YA many times, and it's something that I am very frankly exhausted of reading. But Ryan Douglas did this. Y'all, Ryan Douglas, I gotta pull out my notes. Ryan Douglas did that story. And so Jake is being haunted by Sawyer Dune, and who is this former school shooter. And so Jake can see these ghosts and these spirits, like after somebody dies, and he begins to sort of begin this search to uncover what this spirit really wants, the spirit of Sawyer Dune really wants. And so the story goes back and forth between the perspective of these journal entries that Sawyer Dune was writing leading up to this school shooting and the perspective of Jake. And I really enjoyed this book. Okay. I really didn't want to put it down. I started reading the physical copy, and then I got the audiobook. Now, audiobooks are something that I really have to pick and choose with, because it's become very evident to me that an audiobook can make or break a book. And I know a lot of people really lean heavy on audiobooks to get a lot of their reading done because, of course, very busy people, especially people that, you know, have jobs and lives and all these different things like that. Audiobooks really help you push through. But an audiobook can really make or break a book. Like, it can be a great book, and I just am suffering through an audiobook. This audiobook was fantastic. It had like the sound effects, the two people narrating were fantastic, and it really made this book super creepy. To me, this book was filled with super dynamic characters. You know, like the encounters with the spirits were super interesting and intense and creepy. And then there was this romance. The romance between Jake, and I'm not going to give it away. There is a romance. Jake has like the cutest romance with a character that I think is written very differently from how people typically write queer romances in books. And so I really enjoyed that. Ryan Douglas does a really good job of addressing things like mental illness, in teens, sexual abuse, and parental neglect in a way that is like really impactful. Like, there was enough restraint, but at the same time, it included enough detail where you really got a picture of these characters and the issues that they were facing and their trauma and different things like that in a way that was just really well done. I also, I really appreciated Sawyer's character and how his actions were explained, but they were not excused. I think that there is a very fine line between sort of like giving too much to somebody like a school shooter and trying to explain away their actions and sort of make people sympathize with them, and just sort of like using their experiences and what was going on with them to kind of just like give a warning almost. And so I think that that was really well done. I really adore Jake and his realistic growth as a character. He was written as a very kind of quiet, odd person, and I think that that really carried throughout the book. There wasn't anything too, you know, out there that really like changed his character too much. Like, Ryan Douglas really faithfully wrote Jake as a character, and it made sense. And I really enjoyed the small details in the book, you know? So of course you get something like the idea of Jake's mother wearing a bonnet, you know, her working as a flight attendant, explaining why she is not home all the time. Like, what always frustrates me is YA books where like the parents just are not there and there's like no real explanation. But also at the same time, she does end up being like present in the novel, and you get some backstory to sort of understand the relationship between Jake and his mother and his past and all of these different things, which I thought was done really well. And also Jake's relationship with his older brother Benji was just so good. And I loved Benji's character and sort of the way that they just had like a very realistic older younger brother relationship, that sibling relationship. It was written really well. And then, you know, you get this tie-in with his grandfather, which ends up coming full circle. So definitely look forward to that. I just really enjoyed the way that, like, you know, Ryan Douglas ended up writing sort of like inserting a little bit of African spirituality in it, you know, the discussion of like the ancestors, but didn't do it like super heavy-handed in a way where you're just like, I'm trying too hard. It was just done really well. So I definitely would encourage everybody to pick up The Taking of Jake Livingston, because I think that it is a super interesting read. And this was Ryan Douglas's debut. And yeah, follow Ryan Douglas on Twitter too. His tweets are great. After I read The Taking of Jake Livingston, I read another YA book. Yesterday is History by Kosoko Jackson. This is another book that I also put on my Black and Queer book list for 2021. And this book, I ended up rating a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I rounded it up to a 4 on Goodreads. Yesterday's History is a time-traveling love story which features a Black queer protagonist. And I was super interested in reading this because the premise sounded super interesting. So Andre Cobb is ready for his life to finally begin. Weeks ago, he received a much-needed liver transplant, and now he can focus on his future. Except one night, he starts to feel shaky and ill, passes out, and wakes up somewhere totally unexpected, the past. Apparently, Andre's new liver came with some side effects of the time travel variety. His new ability transports him to 1969, where he connects with Michael, the boy who lived in his house 50 years ago. And then, just as suddenly has arrived, he slips in time back to the present day, where the family of his liver donor is waiting to explain the ins and outs of time travel. They task their youngest son, Blake, with teaching Andre how to use his unexpected gift. Andre splits his time, bouncing between the past and the present, between Michael and Blake. Michael is everything Andre wishes he could be, free-spirited, passionate, and open to everything. And Blake, still reeling from the death of his brother, keeps him at arm's length despite their obvious attraction to each other. Torn between two boys, one in the past and one in the present, Andre has to figure out where he belongs, and more importantly, who he wants to be, before the consequences of jumping in time catch up to him and change his future for good. And I definitely have to look at my notes for this book because I had a lot of thoughts, and reading all these different books, I definitely get a little bit confused sometimes with what I'm talking about. But so Andre, let's talk about what I enjoyed first. So I really enjoyed the hopping between the past and the present, and the sort of like grappling with this budding relationship with both Michael and Blake. But what I will say is that Blake just wasn't a good match for Andre. He was disrespectful on like so many occasions. They fell out multiple times over the course of this novel, which was, way too short for them to fall out as much as they did, in order to just continue reconciling. Blake ended up really crushing any sort of hope that Dre could be with Michael. So it was just very, while that was, realistic in a way, the idea of him being with this guy that exists in 1969, that's just not realistic. I think that it was just kind of like, he did it in such a mean way all the time. It was like, what do you guys actually like about each other? You really could see that the only attraction that Andre had with Blake was physical. And you could see that Kosoko Jackson was definitely just trying to basically make Blake this sort of brooding bad boy love interest, which I don't enjoy that much in books. I'm being very nitpicky. But this book following a Black queer protagonist, and you have the opportunity to have this character go into the past, and you want to add some social commentary to this book. I'm questioning Kosoko Jackson's decision to make Dre fall in love with two white men 60 years apart. You could have him go back in time and see, the effects of the civil rights movement, in that moment. You're right at the end of the 60s. You really could, add that in. And so he sort of kind of tries to mention Stonewall, and I think name drops MLK once or twice, but it was just lacking in historical context. And I just really wish that he had done more to, give Black history a little bit more light, Black queer history a little bit more light in this book, rather than just focusing so much on these two white love interests. So if anybody else has read it, let me know what you thought about that, because that was something that I was like, it kind of just held me back from really falling into this story, because there was such an opportunity. You have this Black character going into the past, and he really has the opportunity to understand a lot more about history. And it was just it was a missed opportunity to show Black love, and portray Black people during that time period. Overall, I think that it was an okay book. I think that the concept was cool. I think that the follow through was lacking in a way. But you know, if you're interested in like time travel romances, in like YA books, definitely check out Yesterday's History by Kosoko Jackson. So the next two, I do not have hard copies of, but I definitely plan on picking up these two books because I enjoyed both of them so much. So the first one, I read The Haunting of Lin Manuel Miranda by Ishmael Reed. So Ishmael Reed is known for writing mumbo jumbo, and that's probably one of his most famous works, but he has written so much. He is a playwright, he is a satirist, he is an essayist. So background, Lin Manuel Miranda is the man responsible for Hamilton, and people love Hamilton. You know, it's beloved. You know, I have to admit, I have listened to the Hamilton soundtrack 1.5 million times. You know, great, you know. However, Lin Manuel Miranda has his issues, especially concerning him and his political involvement in Puerto Rico, and you know, some of the campaigns that he's funded and a lot of different things. I will link articles down below so that you can read up more about the issues that a lot of people have had with Lin Manuel Miranda. And everybody knows that I love Toni Morrison, and Toni Morrison could not stand Lin Manuel Miranda. And a lot of authors and social critics do not like him, and for good reason. Ishmael Reed was funded by Toni Morrison and allowed to write in her home The Haunting of Lin Manuel Miranda. And one of the biggest issues that people have criticized Hamilton about is the fact that it casts all people of color, Black and Latinx people, as the founding fathers and these people within history, and it sort of skims over the fact and, you know, labels these men, these presidents within history, these political leaders within American history as like these abolitionists or these anti-racists, when realistically a lot of them owned slaves, a lot of them did a lot of terrible things, a lot of them funded a lot of things and supported a lot of, you know, policies and supported the enslavement of Black people and, you know, the slaughtering of indigenous people and all these different things. Ishmael Reed wrote The Haunting of Lin Manuel Miranda, funded by Toni Morrison, to sort of correct this false history that that is sort of being delivered or supported through Hamilton, the musical. And so it's basically like a play on A Christmas Carol. And Lin Manuel Miranda wakes up and is being haunted by the spirits of indigenous people, enslaved Africans, and even indentured servants from the time. Ishmael Reed does a really good job of not just simply ranting about Lin Manuel Miranda's wrongdoings, but sort of giving voice to these people that are ignored, or their plights are ignored in Hamilton the play. So it's such a wonderful educational tool that I think should definitely be paired with Hamilton. It's super short. I read it within like an hour, and it contains like these really great monologues that sort of correct this history. And Lin Manuel Miranda, when everybody was funding all these schools to go see Hamilton and, you know, to teach Hamilton within their classrooms, Lin Manuel Miranda specifically asked if students could see a showing of The Haunting of Lin Manuel Miranda. And I forget what organization it was that he asked, but they refused. And so that kind of shows that, you know, Hamilton, as great of a musical as it is, it has its flaws. And Ishmael Reed really sheds light on these flaws in The Haunting of Lin Manuel Miranda. And I loved this quote specifically from the play. It says, "Didn't you take the hint when the Rockefeller Foundation endorsed your play, Hamilton? Did you think that the Rockefellers are for revolution? You think they would have bought 20,000 tickets for the school children if you'd shown Hamilton as he really was? Do you think American Express hired you because of revolution? That they wanted to turn their company over to their workers? And what about your work for Disney? Do you believe their board of directors is a bunch of socialists? Are you that naive?" And so when people say like how much of a challenge Hamilton is to like the narrative of this narrative of what is American history, is it really that much of a challenge if all of these, you know, capitalist organizations, these organizations that are invested in sort of like making more money while keeping poor people down, is it really that radical of a thing? So I definitely would encourage everybody to pick up that play. It was so good. It was so good. After I read The Haunting of Lin Manuel Miranda, I picked up Teaching My Mother to Give Birth by Warsan, Shire. This was a collection that I had picked up around 2017, if I'm correct. Like my Goodreads legit said that I started reading this in 2017. And I had started reading it. I read the first couple of poems. I let somebody borrow it, and I have never gotten it back. And this was the collection that the poetry from Beyonce's Lemonade was adapted from. And so I had to get it because if you know me, you know that I am a Beyonce stan. I am a faithful member of the Beehive. And so no Beyonce slander will ever be tolerated. But this collection, it blew me away. You really could feel like the love, the despair, the grief, the trauma, this sort of narrative of kinship, this feeling of, you know, being forced out of your home and coming to a new land, you know, as a refugee. And I really enjoyed how, you know, sometimes when you read poetry can be a lot. And I think that Warsan Shire does a really good job of writing things that they have so much depth, but at the same time, it's you can read it and grasp it, you know? I absolutely loved all of these poems, and I was absolutely blown away by this collection of poetry. And I have enjoyed being able to get into a lot more poetry recently. They are really quick reads for me, but they are definitely things that I will go back and read again. And this is definitely a collection of poetry that I will go back and read over and over and over again. And last but not least, if you watched Tank of the Banga's Tiny Desk, can you drop a balloon in the comment section below? If you are a Tank of the Bangas fan, drop a balloon in the comment section below. I want to know, all my Tank of the Bangas fans, because Tank released a book of poetry. Tarriona Tank Ball released Vulnerable AF, and I just love Tank and the Bangers so much. Like, their song Roller Coaster is legit a song that I listen to almost every single day, multiple times. And I love their music. I absolutely love their music. But Tank is the center of this group. She provides the vocals. She provides the poetry that really carries their music. And so I was super excited when I saw that Tank was coming out with a book of poetry. like, because when you're listening to their music, you know that Tank is the one who has the whimsy, you know, the different vocal inflections, the cartoonish way that she sort of delivers a lot of her poetry, alternating between the singing and, you know, powerhouse like slam poetry style that she is known for. So I think that you definitely get glimpses of that in Vulnerable AF, but I definitely feel like at certain points, it feels like those moments are very few and far between. Many of the poems are very short, which of course isn't like a sure sign of whether or not something will be good, but I think that, you know, you really get a glimpse of like the strength of Tank's poetry writing in the much longer excerpts from this, like the second to last piece, Adam, and, you know, the familiar piece, Damaged Merchandise, which is what Walmart is based off of, their song. So I really had super high expectations for this because of the fact that I do love Tank the Bangas so much and I listen to their music all the time. But, you know, I was kind of let down in a way. And I really just wish that a lot of these poems were a lot more full. But there is an audiobook version of Vulnerable AF, which I also did listen to because I knew that I needed to hear these poems in Tank's voice. And so I definitely encourage people to listen to that audiobook. It was very soothing. So I definitely encourage that. And I'm looking forward to seeing Tank release more books of poetry and just like sort of making the poems a little bit more full. Because I was expecting like the like long like narratives like You So Dumb and like Roller Coasters and like Boxes and Squares. This was a little bit of a letdown for me, but I would definitely support Tank if you are a Tank and the Bangas fan. So definitely go pick this up and support her. So those are all of the books that I read during the month of July 2021. Let me know what you've been reading lately down in the comment section below. Remember to press that thumbs up button. Remember to press subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see all of you in the next one. And always remember that you are loved.